Throughout this country's history, through civil war and world wars, international crises, and civil unrest, the institution of jury trials and the business of the people's court has survived and functioned. In the most difficult of times, Americans came forward to perform their civic duty as citizens, charged to resolve serious issues in both criminal and civil cases. After a recent moratorium in Florida, jury trials are already coming back slowly online here. Jury summonses are being mailed, and courthouses are prepared to restart this vital service. Here in the 12th Judicial Circuit, which is Sarasota, Manatee, and DeSoto counties, cases are just starting to be tried. Some viewers may be called to serve as jurors. The program today is to inform the viewing public of the steps being taken to make sure citizen participation is safe and secure. We have as a guest the judicial officer who supervised the criminal division and who oversaw the implementation of COVID protective measures and the reopening of the courtroom for trials. He's actually conducted jury trials in the time of COVID. He will tell us about the extraordinary efforts being made by court administration, the clerk, county staff, and the sheriff to ensure the safety of all members of the public who have need to come upon the courthouse premises. So, let me introduce Circuit Judge Charles Roberts. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you.
So, let's hear a little bit about your background and experience in criminal law and what you're functioning now as a judge in the time of COVID.
Well, I've been in the system for almost 40 years now. Started off as an attorney with the state attorney's office back in the early 80s. Worked my way up to a chief homicide prosecutor at the state attorney's office here in Sarasota. I've worked Sarasota, Manatee County as well, Charlotte County also, where I started my career. Then in 2002, I became a judge, and I've been doing primarily work in the criminal division. So between my work as a prosecutor for all those years and my work as a judge and mainly in the criminal divisions, I've had my share of jury trials, probably as a lawyer and as a judge, many hundreds of jury trials. So I'm very familiar with the system and very anxious to talk about what to expect in these difficult times right now.
And actually, you served as administrative judge for the felony division for a number of years, which requires you to coordinate jury trials and to help the new judges and orient them and basically do a lot of the work behind the scenes that the public never sees. Let's talk about what happened when COVID hit. The Supreme Court took some action. Our local chief judge, Kimberly Bonner, took some action. So what happened?
Well, when COVID hit back in March of last year, the Supreme Court of Florida issued a moratorium on all jury trials throughout the state of Florida. And as you can imagine, that had the effect of causing quite a bit of backlog of cases that really needed to go to trial. Certain rules were put into place that gave us some wiggle room as far as the time periods in which to bring people to trial. But we had to make sure that everything was safe for everyone involved in a jury trial, not only the litigants, the attorneys, the court personnel, but also the jurors. And so there was a very strict policy that was implemented throughout the state that until different counties and circuits reached certain benchmarks of safety based on CDC guidelines, local health requirements, and so forth, the jury trials could not resume until those benchmarks were reached. They were designated as Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. Essentially during Phase 2, which we're in right now, jury trials could resume if we had strict protocols in place that would guarantee the safety of everyone concerned. So that moratorium in Sarasota and Manatee and DeSoto counties remained in effect until very recently. We reached Phase 2 in October, and very shortly thereafter, we had a committee formed locally to see how we can best resume jury trials in a way that would keep everybody safe.
Well, one of the important rights that the accused have in criminal trials is a right to a speedy trial. How was that handled by the Supreme Court?
We have a rule here in Florida. It is called the Speedy Trial Rule, as you mentioned. Essentially, from the date of arrest, the state or the system has 90 days to bring a person to trial if it's a misdemeanor, and 180 days to bring a person to trial if it is a felony case. Obviously, a defendant can always waive that right, but in the absence of such a waiver, we would normally have to bring that case to trial within those time periods. What the Supreme Court did in their big order back in the spring of 2020 was basically halted the speedy trial rule, which meant that the time was, they call it tolled, which means suspended until an order later, which has not happened yet, puts the speedy trial rule back into effect. So right now there is a pause in that speedy trial that gives us a little bit of wiggle room in order to get the people to trial. But we do recognize the importance of bringing people to trial, especially those who are in custody, and we're doing everything we can to try to get as close to normal as possible and resume the trial process.
Well, of course, what this means is that there's a backlog accumulating. So at some point, when we get back to, quote, normal times, there's going to be a pretty active criminal bench as well as a civil bench.
Very much so. We can tell already from our dockets. The dockets are getting much larger because we're not resolving as many cases as we had in the past, and that is understandable given the pandemic and the serious consequences of possibly doing things too quickly. So we will have a backlog. We are, by resuming jury trials now, we are making some progress in attacking that backlog. We have criminal trials scheduled every week now. Very often cases are resolved without a trial. Most cases are resolved without a trial, but those that have to be tried, we're ready to do those again, and as long as we keep going in the right direction with the pandemic and not take a step back, we should be okay, but it will be difficult. There are counties in the state who were in phase 2, had resumed jury trials, and because of the uptick in positivity rates, they had to step back to phase 1 and halt jury trials again. We are fortunate with our positivity rates in our circuit of not having that problem. We're just keeping our fingers crossed that people will remain safe and the positivity rate will not go up.
Well, this program is being broadcast pretty close to the beginning of February 2021, and I think we just need to note that things can get more intense or more relaxed depending upon what the positivity rates are. And we're kind of designing the airplane in flight here to make sure we're meeting the CDC guidelines and the Supreme Court requirements. Are you able to conduct some hearings by Zoom or video conference?
Yes, since this all started in the spring, the Supreme Court essentially mandated that we would have to do everything by remote technology except those situations that require by law an in-person appearance. Those are limited but important. For example, if a defendant is arrested, he or she is entitled to a first appearance before the judge within 24 hours. Those kind of hearings have to continue regardless of the pandemic. We have made efforts to do these hearings using remote technology by video, so it is in fact as close to an in-person proceeding as you can have.
And that's important because the accused then has an opportunity to be released on bond or without bond or on pretrial conditions.
Correct. And so in those situations, we have the courtroom set up where the judge is in the courtroom, the attorneys are in the courtroom keeping social distancing, the defendant is over in the jail facility appearing by video, so he or she can see the judge, see the attorneys. That can be the same type of communication that they've always had. Other hearings.
How about arraignments, which is when they come in to enter a plea after being charged?
Yes, until we reached phase 2, all the arraignments were being done remotely. We have now progressed to phase 2, which does call for in-person appearance by defendants at arraignment. So at the courthouse on arraignment day, defendants do come to the courthouse. There's a very strict screening protocol at the front entrance, coordinated extremely well by court administration, the sheriff's department, the clerk's office, the court system. People are tested as far as temperature. They go through the COVID questions, and if all goes well, they are allowed into the courtroom for the entry of that plea or to obtain an attorney and come back on a future court date. We still try to do as much as we can remotely. I, as well as all the other judges, have gotten pretty good at using the Zoom technology. Most of my hearings are done by Zoom, and everyone is given advance notice of how to log in, and we have full hearings by Zoom, which work extremely well. And I anticipate that once the pandemic is over, I think there could be a lot more Zoom hearings. And when you think about it, for an attorney to come down to Sarasota for a 2-minute hearing, that does seem to be perhaps a waste of resources when the same thing could be done using Zoom technology. So we're exploring that option for future court proceedings.
Well, let's talk about the arraignment process, because that's a huge number of people coming into the courthouse. Courtrooms can only hold so many people. How do they arrange the courtroom? And there's one big one that's used for arraignments because it has so many seats. But you'll maybe have 50 or 60 or more people coming in. How is that regulated?
What we've done, obviously we try to minimize the number of people in the courtroom. If a person already has an attorney, we let them know at the door that they do not have to actually come into the courtroom. So we limit the number of people, so only those that have to come in front of the judge where he or she may want to enter a plea or may want to have a continuance in order to hire an attorney. Those are the people that come into the courtroom. And you're right, we have several large courtrooms. We very mindful of the social distancing requirements. The seats are all labeled as to where one can sit.
They block it off.
They block it off.
So.
And so what we've done for jury trials, we have to use those large courtrooms because of the social distancing requirement. For those who have come to the jury selection process in the past, they're probably used to all assembling in a very large assembly area where everybody is sitting right next to each other. What we've done with the jury selection process now during COVID is we have divided the group up into 2 groups. One group would go into the main courtroom, and we can fit about 20 people in there when you factor in the social distancing. And then in the jury assembly room, we can hold about another 20 other people. And so while the jury selection process will continue in this way for a while, it is going well. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer because we may have to do it in 2 waves in order to have the limited number of people in the courtroom.
Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a person called in for jury duty. They will typically get a summons in the mail.
Yes.
And that's based on driver's license information, so it's random and equitable as far as pulling them in. So when they come to the courthouse, the first thing that'll happen is the screening you mentioned?
Exactly. At the front entrance to the courthouse, there'll be the screening. There'll be the people who will have the list of the people who are coming in for jury duty, those who are coming in for other hearings. And what we've done is we've changed the time of the jurors coming in, so will not conflict with the larger number of people coming in for the arraignments, so that we'll have a limited number of people coming to the courthouse at a time. So once they are screened and they pass the screening process, they're then directed to go to the jury office, where they're then directed to one of the two rooms.
So they've had their temperature checked at the door, and I assume they're requiring everybody to be masked.
Everybody has to wear masks, yes.
Okay. They go to these separation assembly areas. How do you call them into the court for, say you have a case, everybody's ready to go. What is the procedure that you follow from that point forward?
Because we're trying to minimize the amount of movement of the jurors and the requirement of constant cleaning after people are in a particular area, we have developed a system where the first group of jurors goes into that large courtroom, which is in Sarasota Courtroom 2A, and they remain there. So when the case is called for jury selection, they are already in the courtroom, which is a great thing to have because they don't have to then move to another area. They don't have to get on an elevator. And of course, elevators are limited to only 3 people at a time. So by doing everything on the same floor, we can not only expedite the process, but also keep everybody safer by not going into different areas of the courthouse and mingling with other people. So what happens is, once that first group of 20 goes through the jury selection process, if a jury is selected out of that group of 20, then the rest of the jurors, prospective jurors, can be released. If we then need to go to another group of jurors, if we haven't gotten a jury out of that first group of 20, those 20 then in the courtroom are carefully moved to an area where they maintain the social distancing, and that other group is brought into the courtroom to go through the same process.
Okay, so let's imagine that you have now selected the jury, and where do you sit them?
All right. Similarly, we have a plan in place to maintain the social distancing. And I will point out that, and just to let all the prospective jurors know how conscious we are and dedicated we are to everyone's safety, everyone has to wear masks. Throughout the courthouse, including the courtroom, we have the sanitizing stations. We have a very dedicated cleaning crew, so that actually during the trial, but even between attorneys questioning witnesses using the lectern, they come up and they spray it down, they wipe it down, and then the other attorney comes up to do the questioning. We are fortunate enough to have some large courtrooms that have large jury boxes. Some jury boxes hold 14, 18 people. And for something that some of our viewers may not know, in Florida, unlike many other states, almost all the juries that we have are 6-person juries rather than 12-person juries. The only time we have 12-person juries are in capital cases or eminent domain cases. 99.9% of the cases we try have 6 or 7-person juries, and so we have the luxury of having the courtrooms that have the large jury boxes where we can put the jurors in position where they're always 6 feet away from the other prospective jurors to maintain that social distancing. Also, the jury rooms that we're using, the deliberation rooms, are also very large rooms that have the table where the jurors can be always 6 feet apart from everyone else.
How about the demonstrating exhibits? Because many cases, of course, require physical items and documents to be viewed. How do you handle that?
We are getting pretty good, and the attorneys are getting pretty good about displaying things using electronic means, a display on a screen where an item can be placed on a device and then projected on the screen. If there is ever a need for a juror to hold an item, and those situations would be relatively rare, but I can see that there may be sometimes a need to actually handle an item if necessary. We have had situations where we allow the jurors to wear gloves. The item is then passed along among the jurors, and then of course they're given the hand sanitizing so as to avoid any possible contamination.
So after an attorney speaks or a witness presents testimony, one of the cleaning staff comes forward with antiseptic or cleansing material and wipes down surfaces that may have been touched.
We do that in every case. Every witness, every examination of a witness, they sit in the back of the courtroom, and it's something that I've had to get used to. After an attorney was done with questioning in a recent case, I turned to the other attorney and said, "You may inquire." And then I saw the young lady who was going to come up and do the cleaning, and I had to say, "Oh, just a moment." She came up, did a beautiful job, and we just moved seamlessly through the trial that way.
How about during breaks? Let's say you take a recess for lunch. When the jurors come back in, are they rescreened?
They are, if they've already been screened, and they'll have a badge to show that they are a juror, they'll be escorted, once again, maintaining social distancing, to the jury area where they'll remain until the case is called back up for trial.
Have you been able to have a hybrid trial where you have witnesses in person and also a witness appearing by Zoom or video?
Yes, and that actually worked quite well. I had a case about a month or so ago where we had one witness who was appearing from out of state. And we can do it even with local witnesses if there's a need for that person to appear by Zoom. But generally for trials, we do want to have the witnesses there in person. However, if everyone agrees or if the court finds a good cause to have the person appear remotely, we do that. And it is a live situation. It is as if the witness is in the courtroom. It's put up on the big screen in such a way where the witness can see everybody in the courtroom and everybody in the courtroom can see the witness.
One of the changes that the Supreme Court allowed as a result of the COVID is the ability of the court on a video conference to swear witnesses.
Yes.
The rule prior to COVID was that they needed to have a notary public in the jurisdiction where they're testifying by video to administer the oath. But now judges can do it, which is, as long as you can confirm the identity, is okay, right?
Yes, and we do that routinely now, and it makes things so much more simple. We routinely administer oaths to people who are out of state, as long as we can confirm their identity. Another thing that the Supreme Court did, as you can imagine, the transport of inmates between county jails became quite an issue with COVID because of quarantining and the desire by the different law enforcement agencies to not transport inmates because of COVID. And what the Supreme Court did was they appointed judges throughout the state, and I happen to be one of them, to act as a circuit judge throughout the entire state, so that if I have someone in our jail who is facing a charge in, say, Orlando, I can take the plea in Sarasota acting as a circuit judge in Orlando, and that has done volumes as far as minimizing the need to transport people and possibly further contamination and a spreading of the disease.
How's the paperwork handled in that remote situation?
Everything is done remotely. The forms are electronically emailed to the court. They are printed out, they're signed, and then emailed back to the county of origin.
So let's talk about the people behind the scenes that are working or not active actually in the, maybe they may actually be in the courtroom. You mentioned the cleaning staff.
Yes.
Of course, you got the lawyers, and they all have to follow the guidelines.
Yes.
And then you've got court administration, which is staff that makes sure everything's running smoothly. Your IT staff. You got the clerk. Mm-hmm. The clerk's physically present.
Yes. The clerks are physically present in the courtroom. Bailiffs are present, and it is truly a team effort. Everybody has their role. Everybody has risen to the occasion and made things work extremely well. The few trials that we've had so far have gone without a hitch, and the feedback I've gotten from jurors has been really positive. A few of them mentioned to me after the trial that they were very impressed with the concern that we had for all of their safety. They were very pleased and felt very safe with all the protocols we had in place.
We've always been fortunate with committed citizens willing to come in and do this. I'm always impressed by that. We've been talking about criminal cases. How about civil trials, jury trials?
Civil trials just recently resumed. I think probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks, civil trials have resumed. And we haven't had too many, but they've gone also quite well. Speaking of civil trials, I'll mention that there is a pilot program that is going to be starting up here next month in Sarasota, where we're going to be attempting, if everyone agrees, to have remote jury trials in civil cases, which will be really interesting. This is a system that would have to have the consent of all the litigants, the attorneys, and so forth, but everything would be done remotely, including the jury selection.
Well, thank you for that. I see we've run out of time. I think you can see a lot of care is being taken to preserve one of the most important rights guaranteed by our Constitution. The guilty and the innocent need their day in court, and civil disputes beg to be resolved, even during pandemics. If you or a friend are called to jury service, I trust the information that Judge Roberts has shared will provide some confidence that the proper guidelines and best practices are being strictly followed, and that you yourself, if called, will agree to serve as an impartial arbiter of your fellow citizens' guilt or innocence or another person's civil dispute. Because justice cannot be achieved without your help. Thanks for watching. This is Lee Haworth signing off for Law in Sarasota.
For more than 36 years, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County has worked one-on-one with estate planning attorneys and their clients to make a lasting impact through philanthropy. Stable, trusted, and knowledgeable, the Community Foundation safeguards the charitable legacies of donors to ensure that they continue for years to come. Visit www.cfsarasota.org or call 955-3000 for more information.